Welcome to The Outlet, an OTG production.
Welcome to a special trade edition of the NBA Outlet. We are presented by OTGBasketball.com. Thanks for tuning in on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Here joining me to talk trades is OTG boss man Nick Fay and trade machine fiend Mr. John Aiello. How's it going, guys?
Going well. Thanks for having me on.
I'm pumped. This is probably my favorite podcast of the year. I love trades, so let's get this cooking.
My favorite time of the year.
Before we get into the trades, just real quickly, it was a great All-Star weekend. Just real quick, what are your thoughts?
Pretty much I'm going to go along with what everybody else has been saying. Saturday was awesome. The three-point shootout was awesome. The skills competition was surprisingly intriguing, and the dunk contest is the best that I've seen since the Vince Carter 2001. The All-Star game was disappointing and crappy as usual, no defense, but overall, I give it it was very entertaining. So, good job, NBA.
I agree. The Saturday was fun. I mean, the All-Star game wasn't great, but dunk competition was awesome. Eric Gordon, Zach LaVine threw down some stuff I've never seen before. So, I know a lot of people talk to me that don't even watch the NBA, and they're pretty hyped about it. So, good for the NBA.
Agreed. Everything about Saturday night was great. Even the Kevin Hart, Draymond Green three-point contest filler was fantastic. So, I agree with you guys. Well done, NBA, putting on a great show on Saturday night. But let's get back to the trades. This is what we're here for. We wanted to start with the Eastern Conference. Let's go ahead and start with the Atlantic Division. John, it's all yours, buddy.
All right. God, I'm so excited. It's my favorite time of the year. I like this more than Christmas. Unfortunately, the Knicks probably aren't going to do anything. So, first team I got on my lineup here is the Boston Celtics. And I think without question they're buyers, and they gotta get a star. They have a solid overall team. I think they gotta get a star that meshes with the rest of the team. And their entire team are assets aside from I don't even know. I think everybody on their team I think would be an asset on a different team. So a lot of options for them. I did trade machine for one trade in particular because I feel like Nick might be interested in it, but I did Marcus Smart and David Lee for Brook Lopez, and I would think maybe a first-round pick or possibly 2 first-round picks, but not the Brooklyn pick. What do you guys think about that trade in particular, and what do you guys think about Boston, what they should do with the deadline coming up?
I don't think that's a terrible trade for the Nets. As long as they get a first-round pick in it, Marcus Smart's definitely a great asset. The Nets don't have any point guard going forward, so that would definitely be a nice player to have. And if it's a decent first-round pick, I don't know, the Nets might go through with it. But, they have the assets to trade for even bigger players. Mentioned DeMarcus Cousins, obviously. They've been mentioning a lot of trade rumors with Whiteside, Horford, Teague, Love. Like you mentioned, John, anybody on the roster is movable, and they have multiple picks to trade. So really, the sky's the limit for Celtics trading.
Yeah, I think David Lee for sure is out, whether they trade him or buy him out. I don't think he's going to be on the books come the end of the year. I also saw a funny video with Jared Sullinger. He put his warm-ups on one of the sideline reporters, and the sideline reporter was like, "Thanks, trade bait." So I think he's a possible out as well. As far as your trade, I think for the Nets to do it, I think it just depends on the picks. But if the Celtics were able to get Brook Lopez, I think that'd be great. They do need someone. They do need a superstar kind of player, and I know Brook Lopez isn't that guy, but he's close enough to where he could make an impact on their front line, which isn't great at this point. I think they're already overachieving with the current roster that they have, so it's something that they should look into. Maybe not specifically that one, but they, like you said, they do need to get someone.
Yeah, I feel like I could have done like 100 trades with Boston. There's just so many opportunities for them, and they have so many different contracts that they could make so many different things work. All right, so now next we got Nick's favorite team, the Brooklyn Nets, and I think without question they they got to be sellers, even though the New York market is going to be would be bummed to see them tank for the next few years. But I think they got to sell. They have no first-round picks. They have a depleted stock of picks. So I think they got to move Lopez or Thad Young, possibly both, for younger players and draft picks. And I'm thinking this is a trade that I thought of, and it's kind of funny that it's been rumored out there. But I said Thad Young going to Brooklyn for Patrick Patterson, DeLon Wright, and the Knicks pick this year. I think it makes sense for both teams. Toronto is a young team already. It's like, you got to take a chance at this point. I think if they got Thad Young, they would have a legitimate shot at winning the East this year. So I think this is a risky move that if you want to be a player and you want to make the finals, you have to make moves like this.
I think that would be a good trade for both teams. I think Thad Young's definitely a nice complementary piece in Toronto. He kind of doesn't need the ball. He can do a lot for you. He hustles. He rebounds. He's pretty good defensively. So, I have no problems with that trade. I also heard some rumors about the Nets possibly trying to move Thad Young for a first-round pick and then flip that pick for Jeff Teague. So that'd be something to maybe keep an eye on. They said they don't want to move Lopez or Young, but like you said, they have to consider it. They don't have a GM right now, and they're likely not to name the GM until after the deadline. So they're kind of in a weird situation over in Brooklyn.
Yeah, who answers that phone from Masai Ujiri? Does Prokhorov answer that joint? Or
the assistant GM, I think it's like last name is like Zanis or something along those lines. But right now, I probably, or at least his guys are going to answer the phone and make the decision.
If this guy can get some picks for Brooklyn, just give him the full-time GM spot, Prokhorov.
I think getting Jeff Teague just doesn't make sense. It's like it's a short-term guy. He's not exactly. He's young, but he's not young by NBA standards. I think he's 28. So it's like I think they got to get picks. I think it's the only thing that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I'm with that too. Although Jeff Teague, he's not really locked in. He's got this year and then next summer and then the summer between, I think summer of 2017 he'll be a free agent. But his deal is nice right now. So I agree. It would be a short-term play. I would rather go with the picks.
Well, if they can get a pick from the Knicks pick from Toronto, I think that would be big. But in most cases, you got to think that they're probably not going to get that good of a first-round pick. So I can kind of see they're thinking a little bit. Obviously, it's not that they want results fast. They do have cap room going forward. So if they maybe had a Jeff Teague, Brook Lopez to at least have somewhat of a base, and they go into free agency with $40 million cap, at least they could have a reasonable team.
That's a fair point. Do you know anything about Joe Johnson? I read something about him possibly being bought out and linked to Miami post buyout, but I don't know if there's any merit to that rumor. Do you know anything about it?
I've heard Miami would have interest if he was bought out, but Joe has really shown no interest in wanting to be bought out from interviews and whatnot. He's said he's a true professional and he'll stick it out. So, he is getting paid close to $25 million. So
that's why he's a true professional.
Yeah, exactly. No problem.
I'll be a professional too.
I mentioned I did a little bit of research on Portland. They had been rumored to have interest in him because they have the extra $20 million in cap space. So
they could just take it on.
Yeah, most teams aren't going to be able to take on that contract unless it was some crazy blockbuster multi-team trade. But for the most part, I think Joe probably sticks out the season in Brooklyn.
So final word, what do you think Brooklyn does?
Honestly,
make any moves?
Most likely, I think they do nothing. I think there's been mentioned they'd probably buy out Andre Bargnani, which would be a blessing. Watching this guy's help defense is terrible. Middle schoolers can probably do a better job than him.
All right, so next up we have my favorite team, the apple of my eye, the New York Knicks, who are, a little bit different story with the Knicks. They actually have some different pieces and some actually tradable contracts. They're not stuck with Stoudemire's $20 million or, J.R. Smith making whatever, $8 million. But the thing is they don't have many assets. I think they're going to be buyers, but I think the realistic and smart thing to do would be sellers, but it's going to be tough and rebuild, but it's going to be tough to find a deal for Melo, and obviously he has that no trade clause, and he doesn't seem like he wants to leave anyways. But I think their goal should be to acquire maybe not a star, because I don't think they have anything even remotely, I don't think they have anything possible or any assets that would make that possible, but they have some assets. Robin Lopez has played pretty well. He's on a very favorable deal. Kylo Quinn's on a good deal. Derek Williams has an option. Lance Thomas, but he actually has a no-trade clause, which is kind of funny, and then Jerian Grant is a rookie. So I have a couple deals, and I'll do this one first. This is the boring one. It's kind of like a cap-savvy deal where they do a trade with Oklahoma City, and they trade Calderon to the Thunder for DJ Augustine and Steve Novak. So they get Calderon's contract off the books for the summer because Novak and Augustine are one-year deals. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think about that deal? Does that make sense for both sides?
Why would OKC want to trade for Calderon?
I think Calderon's got playoff experience. He's a knockdown three-point shooter. I think that's the thing that OKC I feel like doesn't have is a lot of three-point shooters. So you can just have Westbrook and Durant go to work and just keep Calderon on the perimeter, just have him just knock down open threes. So that's why I think it makes sense for OKC. He's got playoff experience with Dallas. I think it makes sense. I mean, he's been pretty good this year, in the time that he's played. He's obviously a liability defensively, but he hasn't been bad, and I think he'd be a good backup point guard.
I could see that as like a fill-in role because, Westbrook's going to play majority of the minutes, but you want to play him off ball a little bit, bring Calderon in. He can kind of space the floor a little bit for KD and Westbrook. It'd be a nice trade for the Knicks. Getting Augustine and Novak, so Novak had his most success in New York.
What do you
think, Parth? Think it makes sense?
Well, I don't know. I don't see why OKC would do it. I'm sure there's a reason. That's why you made the trade. But I personally don't see why Jose Calderon is a better player over DJ Augustine. I don't know what DJ Augustine's making, but I'm looking at Calderon right now, and he has $14 million. That's including this year and next year.
Right, but my reasoning to Nick was that he's got the playoff experience with Dallas, and he's a knockdown three-point shooter, so he's a guy that you can put on the floor with Westbrook and Durant and have him just kind of sit in the corner and just knock down threes. That was my reasoning.
I feel like DJ Augustine could do similar things. But he's I would take Augustine over Calderon. And in terms of, I don't feel like OKC would make that trade just because I feel like they have a better chance of a championship with Augustine over Calderon, even though both are small pieces to a big puzzle.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So this is my other deal that I was really excited about. So it's a 3-team deal with the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Hawks. The Knicks get Tiago Splitter and Jeff Teague. The Celtics get Al Horford and Jose Calderon. And the Hawks get David Lee's expiring deal, Robin Lopez, Avery Bradley, and a first-rounder, maybe a couple first-rounders from Boston. Do you think that's a somewhat, maybe slightly possible deal where the Knicks get Teague? I felt like it was the only one I could come up with. I was like, all right, maybe this makes some kind of sense.
I think if the Knicks were to get Teague, I definitely think a third team would have to be involved. So it's more likely than the Knicks trading the Hawks straight up.
Right, I'm with that too. I think a third team needs to be involved. Does that actually happen? I don't know.
Probably not.
I'm so unsure about what Atlanta wants to do. So
yeah,
I feel like if they don't.
Well, I think.
Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
I think Splitter. I think Splitter getting hurt out for the year. I think if a team is willing to take on that contract, it gives them a lot of leverage. And I feel like the Knicks, because they're so desperate for a point guard, I feel like they'll be like, all right, whatever, we'll take Splitter's contract on as long as it means we can get Jeff Teague. Because that's $9 million for this year and next year for Splitter.
And it was a hip injury for Splitter, right? So that's pretty serious. So I guess that does. Taking on a contract is pretty nice, especially if a team wants to rebuild going forward. They want that cap space.
I think another thing to look forward to is the free agent class of 2017, especially at the point guard position, is really, really like there's some elite guys that will come out that year. And even this summer, I think Conley is a free agent, so I think making a play for both of those, or Conley for this upcoming year, and the bigger guys like Steph Curry, Chris Paul, whoever else that you can think of, they're probably in that 2017 class of free agents for point guards. So I think the Knicks would be better off doing that than going after a Jeff Teague, personally.
See, I think they would be better off getting Teague because he's only on a 2-year deal and he expires by 2017 anyways.
Do you think that makes a difference though? Like, let's say for example they do get Teague, they obviously will have his bird rights going forward. But do you think having him over someone like a Conley or a Curry or Westbrook or whoever else is in that class? I know it's a long shot to get those guys, but it is New York. If Phil's still there at that time, you still have Phil, and you probably have a better coach. We obviously don't know who they're going to hire now, but I don't know.
No, my reasoning is that they get Teague to make them more competitive this year and next year, and then his deal is done next summer so that you have the opportunity to get those other guys like Curry, Westbrook, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so that was my reasoning with getting Teague as opposed to Conley, who's I think 28, and you're going to sign him to like a 4-year max deal or close to max deal. So I think it makes more sense contractually and like financially, all that stuff, to get someone like Teague who's a short-term solution as opposed to long-term.
Well, my one thing about Teague, even the Knicks or the Nets trading for him, would be that, I mean, one reason that Atlanta's not doing as well this year is Jeff Teague's not playing as well as he did last season. So I think that's kind of like he's not playing as well this year, so there's a reason Atlanta kind of wants to trade him. So I was always wary about kind of picking him up, even as a Nets or Knicks perspective. You know what I mean? There's a reason that they're trading him. There's a reason they're not doing as well, and he's one of the reasons.
Right, and I think Schroeder showing potential to be a starter and being a high caliber point guard. I think that makes Atlanta okay with trading Jeff Teague too. Him playing well and him not playing as well and having Schroeder kind of makes it okay. Kind of makes the decision easy for them.
Yeah, I mean, at times I know in like clutch time they've elected to go with Schroeder over Teague for that reason.
All right, so next team, Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, not a lot to say in terms of. I have a couple good ideas, I think, but in terms of trades, I feel like they're not going to do much. I mean, they have some assets and some young players, but I just don't really know what their goal is for this year, other than I guess to show some potential for next year. Should be sellers, even though they don't really have much, and by that I mean get rid of one of their big men. Probably, I mean, they won't be able to get rid of Embiid, but Okafor and Nerlens I think makes a lot of sense. So I had a couple of deals in mind. I thought maybe like Nerlens Noel to the Lakers for Julius Randle. And another trade I had was either Noel or Okafor, and Robert Covington going to and the draft rights to Dario Saric to Portland for CJ McCollum and Myers Leonard. I feel like that makes some sense. Philly gets a really good young guard. Portland gets a good big man to go along with Damian Lillard. And they get a shooter to spread the floor, too, with Bob Covington. So I think it makes sense for both sides. What do you guys think?
I think it probably wouldn't make sense for a regular team, but, like, honestly, nobody knows what the Sixers are doing. You don't know what they're trying to get going forward. If they're trying to get more draft picks, if they're trying to get good players. You know what I mean? Like, we really don't know what their plan is. Like, do they want to get picks at this point? Or there's been rumors they've called the teams for some of the big-time players. Is that them just, doing their diligence? Or do they really think they need a big-time player? Or are they going to just keep stacking picks for the next 3 years? That's why I really just don't know what's good with Sam Hinkie. Like, I don't know. I wish I kind of knew, like, his plan. If there is one.
I just don't know. I don't know what they're doing either. I mean, for me, the thing that makes the most sense is to trade one of the big men, because you can't play because Noel is athletic enough to play the 4, but he can't shoot. Okafor is not athletic enough to play the 4. Then you obviously have Embiid, and you're kind of like still banking on him being something. So it's like I just feel like you got to trade one of those guys, and getting a stretch 4 makes sense. Getting a good guard makes sense. I mean. I think they're done with the whole stockpiling picks thing. I feel like Philly fans, if they draft if they tank or try and throw away the season again, I feel like Philly fans are just gonna like stop going to games. But who knows with that team?
And it's like interesting because like you think about it, Noel, like maybe they can move, but he's really their only solid 4 on the team. And then you have Okafor and Embiid who both play center, and Embiid really has no value at this point because he hasn't played on the NBA yet. So Okafor has the most value. Would they consider moving Okafor? You know what I mean? Like, because they're stuck with
Yeah.
Embiid. No one's going to really give them fair value for Embiid, so there's really no point in trading him unless somebody's.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think I would move Okafor, I think, over Noel because I think you could get more value for Okafor. And Okafor, I think Noel is okay in Philly. I think Okafor doesn't want to be in Philly at all.
Yeah, he doesn't like the losing, that's for sure.
Right.
He like takes it out on the public too when he doesn't like losing.
I
Yeah.
mean, they
Yeah,
asked for it though. Like, I'll defend him a little bit, but obviously you're not supposed to like punch people in the face. But that guy was just like kept riding him. Like, what do you think's gonna happen if you keep bothering somebody? That he's just gonna like be friendly to you?
True. I mean, the person in public, that random guy, thought he was on Twitter, and realized really quickly that he was not on Twitter.
That's so true.
But as far as the Sixers go, I think they're one of the most interesting teams because before, like I know you, Nick, you mentioned that you don't know what they're doing. Before, we did know what they were doing. They were just trying to hoard picks. But now with the addition of Colangelo and that whole different side of thinking, basically the opposite side of what Sam Hinkie's trying to do, where they find that medium and what they end up doing, I think is going to be you'll find out through this trade deadline if they do end up making a move, and you'll find out in the draft if they do end up trading players to move up, move down, whatever they want to do, and depending on who they draft in free agency. So I think this summer is huge for Philly.
I would agree. I think a lot of teams, they don't have any real rush to make a move at the deadline. They feel like they can just wait to the summer. So it could be kind of a dead trade deadline, or it could be really active. But the teams have the option to wait if they're not getting the offers they want.
All right, so the next team we got is the Toronto Raptors, currently sitting at second in the Eastern Conference behind the Cleveland Cavaliers. Kind of, I don't want to say overachieving, but I don't think many people thought they were going to be number 2 in the East this year, especially after that disappointing finish in the playoffs last year. But I think without question, everybody would agree with their buyers. The only issue is they don't have a whole lot of assets. You know, when your team is playing that well, you don't want to get rid of too much and kind of mess up the whole vibe you got going. But I think their biggest issue is right now they need an improvement at the power forward spot, and I think you need to stretch 4 to go along with Valanciunas because he's he just kind of just plugs up the entire post. In terms of assets, they got Pat Patterson, James Johnson, Luis Scola is only on a 1-term deal for like $3 million, so he could be moved. The rookie DeLon Wright, I think, can be moved considering they already have two point guards ahead of them, and you also have Lucas Nogueira and the Brazilian Kevin Durant, Bruno Cabollo, whatever his last name is. So. I think some guys they're going to look at, Thad Young. They said they're not interested in Markieff Morris, but Ryan Anderson doesn't make a whole lot of sense because he's pretty much just primarily offensive and doesn't do a whole lot defensively, and I think that's the Raptors' biggest issue. What are some guys that you think could really help the Raptors at that power forward spot? Or do you think there's another position that they should maybe look at?
No, I would agree. Power forward's definitely the spot they need to upgrade because you got to think about it. DeMarre Carroll hasn't even been playing. He's going to come back. They'll have plenty of depth at small forward. So that power forward spot where they have Pat Patterson and Scola, they want to upgrade. I think Thad Young is definitely a nice fit there, like we mentioned about the Knicks. With the Nets. And he could definitely be a nice complementary player because he doesn't really need the ball. He can kind of score on his own, rebound, get those hustle plays that championship teams really need.
Agree with you guys. 4 is the spot for them. One name that I haven't really heard in trade rumors, and I don't even know if he has a market, but his cousin just got traded, so maybe he wants out of Orlando too, and that's Channing Frye, who I think could be an interesting stretch for the Raptors, just because he's a pick and pop threat, but there's no pop threat if the ball handler and the shooters around the court aren't a threat. You know what I'm saying? Like you could just stay with the pop man, stay with the roll man, whatever. Stay with the screener if the guys in the corners aren't shooting threes to where you have to respect it, or the ball handler can't pull up and shoot a 3. So I think on a team like this with Corey Joseph, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Terrence Ross, guys who can really score and shoot threes, I think Channing Frye would be a great fit. Defensively, I don't know, but offensively, I think it'd make them even more dynamic than they already are.
Another name that I heard mentioned with Toronto is Kenneth Faried. I don't know how that fit would work because he doesn't really have much of an outside game, but he would give him. He's been playing good defense this year and a lot of energy.
Yeah, that's what you get with Fareed is a ton of energy. He'll rebound the ball. I haven't watched much of Jonas Valanciunas this year to see if he's progressed, but I mean, it's someone that can get boards and kind of just be there next to Valanciunas. Offensively, Valanciunas, I'm sure I don't know if he's improved, but he can't be worse than last year, right? He's got to be at least, you would think, at least as good as last year.
Yeah, I haven't watched a whole lot of Toronto to know. I mean, I haven't heard that he's like made that like next step, but I know he also had like a hand injury or something. But to go off Fareed, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, because it could allow Toronto to go small. Like if you could play Fareed at the 5, against maybe like Cleveland. You know, when Cleveland has Tristan Thompson out there, and then you could have like DeMar at the 4 or James Johnson at the 4, and then, you know, like DeMar DeRozan, Corey Joseph, Lowry. So I actually like the Kenneth Fareed idea. Just not sure what it's going to take to get him. They probably have to give up the first-round pick and Patterson. And I don't know. I mean, Denver seems pretty high on Fareed for some reason, so I'm not sure if even that'll get it done.
Denver's high and low on Fareed. They like him one year, they give him a big deal. Next year, they don't like him. I don't know what's going on with Fareed.
I think a lot of
he's a possible person that could move.
A lot of the organization I have read is kind of split on Fareed. Some really like his game. Others are like, oh, we could trade him. He doesn't really do that much.
Well, there was the one year where the Knicks were about to trade Iman Shumpert. It was like Iman Shumpert and like something else for Kenneth Fareed. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And I think it was right around the time when the Knicks almost got Kyle Lowry for basically nothing. But yeah. Anyways, on to the next team.
They do need a 4 though. You were on the money. It's just a matter of who they get now.
Yeah. Oh, actually, one guy I saw today. They did a Patrick Patterson for Taj Gibson swap, which I think makes a lot of sense. So forgot to throw that name out there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know you're going to talk about the Bulls here in a little bit, but they have a logjam at the 4 and 5 spot. So someone that could be an actual trade partner for the Raptors.
Right. So perfect segue. The Chicago Bulls, we're on to the East. The East, still in the East, but we're on the Central Division now. Chicago, I think there's a lot of debate about what they should do. I think they should be sellers. Pau Gasol has an option, and I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for him to go back there. D Rose has got 1 year left on his deal next year, and I mean you're not going to get anything for him, but you know maybe you just ride it out. I mean I would just honestly just like sit Jimmy Butler for the rest of the year, just kind of tank. And just ride out this year, and then I think they need to rebuild. But we talked about how Taj Gibson seems like he's an option to get moved. Noah was an option, but he's injured, so he's definitely not going anywhere. And other than that, I don't think they have a lot of tradable players other than Butler. And obviously he's not going. Do you guys think I guess Bobby Portis is an asset? Tony Snell, Mirotic. Dunleavy could be an asset depending on the team, and Doug McDermott maybe depending on the team. But they just don't have a lot of assets, and I think they should try and just rebuild and blow it up. I don't know what you guys think, but
yeah, they're kind of caught in between. I mean, there's been talk about them maybe trying to add a player, or maybe just trying to blow things up, like you mentioned. The only person that they really need to keep is Jimmy Butler. Everybody else they could probably move. I'd probably actually keep Portis too. I think they like what they've seen out of him, but there's been talk about moving Gasol, Rose, Dunleavy, Snell, so Taj Gibson, like you mentioned. So there's plenty of options. I don't know what Chicago's really going to do, but they can go a couple different ways.
I also think they're sellers. If this team could not beat the Cleveland Cavaliers did they have just one guy out? Who did they have out? Was Irving still playing?
Irving was still playing, but no Love.
No Love, and then I think JR was out a couple games.
JR or Shumpert. I think JR might have been suspended or something. Right? Yeah. So no Kevin Love and no JR.
So yeah, if the Bulls didn't think that with Thibodeau on their team and Kevin Love and J.R. Smith out for Cleveland, that if they thought they could beat them then and didn't, there's no way that they could think that this team now could beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, because that's the team you have to go through in the East. So I personally am with John on this, and I think they have to be sellers. Joakim Noah's gone after this year. Pau Gasol has, like you mentioned, he has the option for next year, which I don't think he takes up either. So I would sell.
I think another point why they could sell is bring in guys that Hoiberg wants for his system that he's running. These are guys for Thibodeau, so kind of give him opportunity to kind of get the players that he wants. So keep Jimmy Butler, get rid of Gasol, Gibson, obviously Noah's leaving. Try to make some moves and see what kind of players you can add to kind of build around what he wants.
All right, so next team, pretty important team, I guess. Number 1 in the East, defending Eastern Conference champions, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Without question, I think they're buyers, and I think their goal, they're not thinking about the East. I think they could pretty much have Kevin Love and Kyrie sit out, and they could beat anybody in the East. Maybe not anymore because Toronto's looking so good, but they always suck in the playoffs anyways. But I think their goal, looking ahead, most likely you're going to see Golden State. There's a chance you'll see San Antonio, but they need athletic two-way wing players. They have too many guys that are one way and not the other. Movable assets, I think Kevin Love is movable, but I doubt they move him midseason. I think they would wait till the offseason. Mozgov is expiring. Anderson Varejao has 3 years left, but he's non-guaranteed money for the next 2, is what I thought I saw. Mo Williams has a 2-year deal, but he's only making like $2 million or $3 million or something. So, there's kind of like, they just need, I don't know what their options are in terms of what they could get. Because Kevin Love, his contract is favorable, but I'm not sure how much value he has now in today's NBA when he's playing power forward against so many quick guys, and his liability on defense is just so much more exposed. So I don't know what the value for Kevin Love would be. I don't think you're getting like what you got for him before with Andrew Wiggins and all that. So what do you guys think? Like, what should their move be? I think they should just go for athletic wings, but I just don't know who's available and who their options are.
They don't really have a lot of assets to move for any of these wings that they covet. There's been talk of them really wanting to add Kyle Korver, Jared Dudley, guys like that, but how are they going to get them? They really don't have anything to move. Like you said, they can move Love, but they're not going to really get a good return for him because he hasn't been great in Cleveland. Boston obviously has had a lot of interest in Love. But I don't really know the moves that the Cavs could make because they just don't have a lot of assets to trade.
Well, they do have, I think I've heard that they want to move Mozgov.
Yes, and Shumpert.
Because Mozgov will demand, even though he's been really shitty this year, he will demand a bigger contract than $5 million per with the new CBA for sure. Other than that, I think what made LeBron so great in Miami was he had shooters. He had James Jones, who would come in and knock down shots, Mike Miller, who would come in and knock down shots, Mario Chalmers, who could knock down shots. So I think someone like a Kyle Korver or Ben McLemore, I think those, and Jared Dudley would be guys that the Cavs would covet. How they get those guys, not sure, but I'm sure they could churn something out.
Right, and
it's kind of like you have someone like an Iman Shumpert. If you think that $10 million a year is going to be a steal of a contract in the sense that, hey, people who are producing similarly going forward in the new CBA or not the new CBA, but the cap rise next year, if they're going to be paid more than Iman Shumpert, it might be a good idea to take him on now if you do think that he's worth $10 million based on the marketplace for next year and the couple years going forward. So that's something that I could do. Obviously, Mozgov could be a rental for any sort of team. I think he's just not getting the correct run with the Cavs team. So I think those are two pieces that they could move. It's just a matter of fact. It's just finding the team that would take those pieces.
So I just thought of a potential trade and something that just popped in my head. But who says no in this deal? Like, what if Cleveland looked to Denver? I saw that Cleveland was interested in Gallinari. what if they offered Kevin Love for maybe like Will Barton and Gallinari? I think contractually, I think that fits. Do you think that's a deal that? Do you think that's like a fair value for what I mean, Barton's basically been sixth man of the year, and Gallinari's been healthy this year. When he's healthy, he's really good. So do you think that's a deal that would make a lot of sense for Cleveland? I mean, or like, I'm not sure what Love's value is because his defense is so poor. But I think next to a certain small forward and a certain center, I think you can kind of mask it a little bit.
I mean, it's tough to say. It depends on how much Denver really values Love at this point. Because, like you said, Gallinari's been playing well this season, so is Will Barton. So that might not be enough for them. You know what I mean? Because what do they want Love? They have a lot of big men going forward that they like. So they would kind of have an excessive amount of bigs. They might want more in that trade.
I still think I would say Cleveland says no in that deal just because last year having Love and Kyrie hurt, it kind of forced it. I think it kind of gave Cleveland, well, not the Kyrie part, but the Love part. It kind of forced Cleveland to play at a slower pace, and I know my friend Josh Earl, who's on Twitter. I don't know his handle, but I'm sure we can link it on here. He mentioned this, that because the Cavs kind of stumbled upon that, it kind of gave them a fighting chance against Golden State. They didn't have to play that up-tempo style. They tried to muck up the game a little bit. But I think because Love was hurt, even though it helped them last year in a sense, you still have those questions that, can this team win a championship? And you just don't know that. You already made a coaching change. Do you really need to blow something up in terms of moving one of your big three and just create more question marks based on the new kind of core of the team? So I don't think they do anything, to be honest. I think there's just too many question marks that come from making a trade.
Good. Is everybody there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Oh, I thought like we lost some people. All right. I'll just move on to the next team.
Hey, hold on. Did you get that?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Okay. All right. So, did anybody else want to add anything else, or are we?
I would just say, all right, I'll go. I think if the Cavs do move on, I don't think they'll move them this year. They'll move them in the offseason.
I was actually going to say the same thing. I don't think they'll move him. I think they're going to give Tyronn Lue a fair shot, with this lineup and with these players, and I think they'll see how he does with that. So enough about the Cavs. I'm sick of talking about them. But the Detroit Pistons are up next, and I don't really have anything to say because I think they made. I mean, this is probably for me. I feel like this is going to be the move of the deadline. Unless something else crazy comes up. But all they gave up was an expiring deal for Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova for Tobias Harris, who's on the first year of I think a $17 million deal for over 4 years. A really good young prospect who can stretch the floor, would play really well against Drummond and Baines. I love the deal. I don't think they need to do anything else other than maybe acquire a serviceable backup. Because Steve Blake is like 80 years old, but I like their lineup, I like their team, and I like the move of getting Harris too. What do you guys think?
Well, I think they had interest in maybe getting another veteran guard, but for the move that they did make, I thought that was a great move for them going forward. It kind of allows them to stretch the floor, and they can switch 2, 3, and 4 defensively with Harris, Morris, and KCP. So I think that's a nice little move for them. It's kind of what me and Parth talked about in the preview podcast. Orlando want to get towards the way that Van Gundy was playing in Orlando with Dwight with Andre Drummond.
Right, I'm with this move for Detroit. I actually don't think it's on the surface it's a clear Detroit win, but if you look a little bit deeper into it, I think it was a fair trade, just based on where both teams are at. Detroit is actually pretty good. I mean, they don't play the best looking brand of basketball, but they're not a bad team. And I think Tobias Harris at 4 and Marcus Morris at 3, and you can flip-flop those two. So I think it's great there. KCP at 2. I think it gets a lot of open shots for the Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond pick and roll with shooters all on the sides. I think that's exactly what Orlando did with Dwight 2009. So I think it's a possibility that these guys could get into the second round of the playoffs. And obviously, we'll find out if it works on the court. But on paper, I really like this deal for Detroit.
Plus, now I think you could even include maybe you could have Marcus Morris go to the bench and then have Stanley Johnson start at the 3. And I think that's a really good – I mean, Marcus Morris is good defensively, but Stanley Johnson has the potential to be, all NBA, like Ron Artest on the perimeter in terms of his athletic ability and his physique. I mean, I'm really high on Detroit. I think when they're rolling, I mean, they're a really good team. I honestly might put them at 3, right behind Toronto and Cleveland. I can't think of a team in the East that is better than Detroit when Detroit is fully healthy. Besides the top 2, of course.
And Detroit did smack Golden State earlier this year, so they're definitely a team that can play.
All right, so 2 more teams left in this division. We got the Indiana Pacers. They're an interesting team because I think people were coming in and they, obviously there was a question mark with Paul George, and they've played okay. They started off really well. They went into kind of a lull recently. I don't know what they're going to do. I honestly think they should kind of sell and get rid of a lot of players. You have some expiring deals with Jan Mahimi and Jordan Hill. They got some assets though. George Hill's got 2 years, $8 million. He's a good point guard. Surround him with certain players, and you have a really good team. I don't think he's like the best player on the team, of course, but they also have C.J. Miles as an asset, Lavoy Allen, Chase Budinger as an expirer. So, what do you guys think? I think Jeff Teague is probably a likely option, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they try and sell and maybe get some picks. Just because I think they have a lot of guys who aren't great players, and you have Paul George, who's I think 26, and then Miles Turner's young. What do you guys think they should do?
I mean, I think they've been looking to upgrade at point guard position. And Jeff Teague has been one of the guys they've looked at. It's tough to say. It depends how far they really think they can go. It's tough to see them coming out of the East with the team they have. I just don't know if their style of basketball get them in the Eastern Conference Finals.
So, did you mention that George Hill, are they shopping George Hill?
They've offered George Hill for Jeff Teague.
Okay, that's really funny because
Not a fair deal at all.
Yeah, I think Jeff Teague is a way better player than George Hill.
I think
George Hill has his place in terms of, I think he's a great 6-man combo guard.
I agree. Yeah,
he's the perfect, because he can play 2, he can play point. It's the perfect kind of guy to where, hey, if my starting point or starting 2 isn't playing or isn't doing what I need them to do, I can stick George Hill in and be comfortable that, hey, he can fill that role. I think he's a perfect 6-man. But I was watching The Bachelor last night, and George Hill and Paul George had an appearance, and they were just talking about how much Indiana means to them and how important it is. And I was like, man, this is a weird time for this episode to come out and have George Hill on it, just because the Pacers are now shopping him after saying all these nice things about the state of Indiana. So I thought that was funny, random story, but yeah, I think an upgrade at point guard is definitely needed for this team.
See, the issue with them, I think if they want a guy like Jeff Teague, I think they'll have to give up Hill and probably a first-round pick, but I don't think they have any extra picks. I think they have all of theirs, but I don't think they have any extras. So it's like, how is it really worth getting Jeff Teague for 2 years, who's an above-average point guard, but he's not elite? How much farther is he really going to take you? And I don't think he raises their ceiling that much more than Hill to make a trade like that worth it.
Agreed.
So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they stay put, but I think they should sell and try and get younger. I wish they had some enough assets to get someone like Kevin Love, because I would love to see George Hill come off the bench for Cleveland. I would love to see Kevin Love next to Paul George, but that's just a dream. But anyways.
I know the only thing I know about the Pacers, I think they were trying to dump Chase Budinger's contract because they expected Paul George to play more at the 4, so there hasn't been minutes for him at the 3. So that's one thing to just keep an eye on.
Is everybody else hearing an echo? Or is that just me?
Yeah, I was hearing it a little bit too.
Okay, too. All right. Me too. I don't know.
Now it's good though.
Okay. All right. So on to the last team for the Central Division in the East, the Milwaukee Bucks. Another interesting team because they were so good last year and they really regressed this year. One of the worst in the East, and they have. I think it's a no-brainer. They've got to trade one of their forwards. They got Chris Middleton, who's playing a lot of two, but I think he's best as a small forward. And they have Giannis, obviously, who's can play some 3 and some 4, and they have Jabari. But with Jabari and Giannis, you have two guys who really can't shoot, who are, can't play anything other than the 3 and the 4. I think their best bet is to trade one of those guys. They have MCW, who's I think next year is the last year of his rookie deal. I think they should look elsewhere, but I saw today that they're not going to trade him before the deadline. What do you guys think in terms of what they should do? I think them buying just doesn't make sense. Obviously, Greg Monroe's been kind of a bust there, and he hasn't panned out to what I mean. I thought he was going to be amazing and really propel that team to like a top 4 team in the East, but they've been really disappointing. What do you guys think?
They've probably been one of the biggest letdowns this season. I think everybody expected them to kind of take a jump in that Eastern Conference playoff race, and they haven't done that. I think I would agree with you. They should be sellers. They should be looking to get some assets maybe, because obviously this team doesn't really fit well together. Monroe hasn't really worked out with the system they run, and I know they said that they told Michael Carter-Williams he wasn't going to be traded, but then I saw someone say that that's the same thing that Philadelphia told him last year.
Right. As soon as I saw that, I immediately thought, I swear I've read that before, heard that before.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's funny because it was a week ago, I think Mark Stein said that they were shopping him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's moved, even though they said that. I wouldn't be surprised at anything. Jason Kidd kind of, I would think, be willing to do some crazy stuff. And I think he has a lot of say in that front office.
Yeah, that's the one player I would immediately move is Michael Carter-Williams. Try to get an upgraded point guard. He's on his rookie deal, and you have that for 2 more years and 1 more year for sure, and then you have the team option. But I would try to move him. I just don't think he's that good. And a team that already lacks shooting, and your point guard can't shoot, I just don't think it works. Personally, I don't think it works.
Go ahead, Nick.
I feel like I agree with Parth, though. That definitely kills you. I think shooting at the point guard position is pretty big in the NBA nowadays. And if you can't shoot at the point guard position, you better be doing a lot of other things really well.
Right. It's like in the NBA, you got to either be able to get to the rim better than anybody else, or you have to be able to be an elite shooter. Like I think the only thing that keeps Jose Calderon in the NBA is because, well, 1, the Knicks suck, but 2, because he's an elite shooter. That's like little things like that. Like MCW can get to the rim, and I think he'll always have a career, but hasn't made that jump in terms of his shooting ability. But I was surprised. So you guys think that they should keep Giannis and Jabari together? I don't like that duo. I was kind of like I wasn't big on the pick to begin with. They're 2 guys that Jabari's got a good mid range, but he can't shoot from 3, and Giannis is pretty bad from 3 too. I just don't like that tandem.
I think the talent is there for both of them to eventually develop 3-point shots. I know Jabari's taken like less than 10 this year, I think. He hasn't made any, but I think he's taken less than 10. I mean, that's not enough sample size to know if he can actually shoot or not. Maybe it's just not in the offense for him, or maybe he's better taking it to the hole. We saw his athleticism in the Rising Stars game. So I would say keep those 2, and eventually I think at least one of them will learn how to be a consistent 3-point shooter. Maybe not a great one, but a consistent one. But it's impossible having a point guard who can't shoot while also having other guys on your team that can't shoot. Like there has to be at least a couple of shooters to kind of get away with having a point guard that can't shoot. Does that make sense?
I agree.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I think they can keep Jonathan Parker. Middleton's a great shooter. They can add a point guard that can shoot and maybe get a center that has some mid-range game that kind of just space the floor a little bit and kind of work around those guys because they're so young and they're so good that you kind of don't want to give up on them yet and give them the opportunity to really expand their game and kind of build around them.
All right. Well, let's
move on. Let's move on to the Southeast Division. Let's start with the top team in the Southeast currently, and that's the Atlanta Hawks. So going in to today, I kind of lean toward them being sellers just because we've heard all these rumors about a lot of their players from the core of their last year being on the block or being in trade rumors. And then Thiago Splitter was just announced today that he's going to get surgery on his right hip, so he's done for the year. So I think that just confirms that, hey, they're probably going to blow this up. What I thought their goal would also going into this trade deadline would be trying to find what they were missing from last year. Their offense isn't nearly as good, partly because Kyle Korver isn't shooting the way he usually does. Could be due to that Delhi injury that he suffered, the high ankle sprain that he had to get surgery on. But regardless, they do have some assets. Kyle Korver is a name that's been thrown around. Al Horford, Jeff Teague. And I haven't heard Dennis Schroeder much, but I think he could also be a guy that could move. A possible target that I've heard is Dwight Howard. He's from Atlanta. Houston wants to move him. It's something that could happen. There might have to be a third team involved, but Al Horford made it known that he wants to stay, but he is a free agent this summer. So is Kent Bazemore. You're probably gonna have to pay them both. So what do you think the Hawks do? Do you think they blow it up, or do you think they try to find what they're missing from last year in terms of their shooting and their playmaking and just being a better offensive threat?
So Al Horford wants to stay, because I heard that he doesn't want to play. I don't know if I've heard that he necessarily wants to leave Atlanta. I just thought I heard that he doesn't want to play center anymore.
That could be true.
So
I've heard he likes Atlanta. His family stays there during the off season. He loves the place. But the thing about him playing 5 could also be true, because he is a slightly undersized 5.
Yeah, and he's not a great rebounder for for the center position. I think they should blow it up. It makes a lot of sense. It's like, I mean, because you think about it, I was listening to something today, their ESPN Lockdown podcast. They laid out all the numbers for the salary cap, and some guys, it's projected to be 92, some are projected to be 95. If it's 95, that means if you're signing Al Horford to a 5-year max deal, that's I think it's like $26 million a year. And it's like, do you really want to pay Al Horford $26 million a year? I mean, I think the team needs to blow it up, because I don't see this. I just don't think their ceiling is that high. Bazemore is expiring. Teague only has a year left after this year, and he hasn't been that good this year. I think their best bet is to get picks, maybe go younger. Schroeder seems like a promising talent. I just don't think their ceiling is that high this year or any time in the foreseeable future to compete with teams like Cleveland, Toronto, Detroit, those guys.
I think they hit their ceiling last season, and they kind of realized, and they're not doing well this season. They overperformed last year. It just makes sense for them to kind of sell, like you guys are saying. Just blow it up, get the picks, and just build going forward, because it doesn't look like this team can really get over that hump in the Eastern Conference.
It's a fair point. So do you both are on the bandwagon that they will indeed trade one or at least a couple of these guys and go in a different direction?
I think. You go ahead, John.
All right. I was just gonna say, I think if you're Atlanta, I think it's a no-brainer, because you look at what Boston really screwed themselves when they offered 4 first-rounders for Frank Kaminsky, because it's like, well, if they're getting 4 first-rounders for that, it's like the bar's been set really high, and it's like, if I'm Atlanta, I'm going to try to get like 3 first-rounders for Al Horford. I don't care if he's expiring. I just think that's an opportunity that's too good to pass up for a guy he's a really good player. He's been an all-star 3 years now. I don't think he's worth $26 million on a team that it's not like he's going to bring you into it's not like he's going to make you a champion. They're still going to be a top 4 team in the East probably, but he's not going to make them a top seed in the East.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the Miami Heat. Going into tonight, I did not know what they would do. There's a lot of different directions for this Heat team to go. I'm not envious of Pat Riley's position right now. But news broke that Chris Bosh could indeed have another blood clot and could be done for the year and possibly his career. I don't want to speculate or anything. We don't have sources, but Chris Broussard has made a living out of not having sources. So there's that. The goal for the Heat, I thought, was find a way to really challenge Cleveland But if Bosh is out, I don't think that happens. So I'm going to assume that they're going to be sellers. Some of the assets that they have are Hassan Whiteside, who's making less than $1 million, but he's probably going to get maxed out somewhere. And I don't think Miami quite wants to do that, and they may not even have the space to do it. Luol Deng and Birdman, who they actually just traded earlier today. They acquired Brian Roberts from the Charlotte Hornets, and they gave up Birdman and 2 second-rounders, and that went to Memphis. Some possible targets that I like for the Heat. I don't personally like this one, but it's been rumored. Dwight Howard is a target, and I think a low-key target would be Mirza Teletovic, someone who could play alongside Bosh if Miami does decide to move Hassan Whiteside. And even if they keep Hassan Whiteside, Mirza Teletovic could play that stretch 4 kind of role. Not nearly as well as Chris Bosh did in terms of defensively, but offensively he can shoot the ball. What do you guys think Miami's going to do?
I mean, the whole Chris Bosh health situation, I really feel for him. I hope it's not anything. I know last year it was I think it was like life threatening. I hope it's not to that degree. So prayers go out to him. But if it is something that's career threatening, it just totally changes what Miami is going to do going forward. I think, because before it was like, all right, you have the option to play Chris Bosh at 5. Let Whiteside walk. You don't have to pay him all that money. But if Bosh is going to be gone, I think, just obviously this is all speculation, like you said, Parth, but it totally changes what they do. In terms of the short term, like before the deadline, I don't know what they're going to do, because Pat Riley's going to want to make a playoff push, but I don't know if you get rid of Whiteside, it's like you gotta get a serviceable big man in return. And I just don't know what Whiteside's market is, because he's an expiring deal and he's had some chemistry issues with Miami.
And another person that I heard the Heat have been shopping a little bit is Goran Dragic. There's been rumor that they had interest in Mike Conley Jr. So, it's definitely really hard to gauge what the Heat are doing. A lot depends on Chris Bosh. Luckily, they found that pretty early, so they can hopefully deal with it, and he can come back this season, but you never know. But, there's been a lot of talk about the Heat moving Mick Roberts and Deng to try to, as a combo, to try to get somebody. It'd be tough.
Yeah, with Whiteside's contract, you kind of have to have a Deng or a McRoberts or a Goran Dragic, because Whiteside's not, for his contract, he's way overperformed for that. He's making less than $1 million. So to get someone like a Dwight Howard who's at like 22 or 23 million, you obviously have to have some other pieces. Even though a Hassan Whiteside for a Dwight Howard trade isn't that far off in terms of talent, but in terms of money, it's huge. So I don't think a 1-to-1 trade would work here. I think a third team would have to be involved. But I actually have no idea what Miami's going to do. Zero. It could go either way. It just depends on the situation with Chris Bosh and how Dwayne Wade wants to work his next salary, his next contract, because he will retire in Miami.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot depends on Bosh, and depends on what they think of Whiteside, if they want to move him and try to get that asset for him, because they don't like him in Miami the way he's been acting recently. So
anyway, moving on. Charlotte Hornets. I think Charlotte, they are buyers. They did lose MKG to a shoulder. I think the same one tore his labrum again and will have surgery. I think their goal is to make the playoffs, because Michael Jordan, he likes making the playoffs, I guess. Some of the trade assets they have Jeremy Lamb, who I think is locked up for a couple of years at $7 million. I think that's an okay contract. Something you can definitely move going into the new cap. They made a trade. They acquired Courtney Lee, and they gave up P.J. Hairston and 2 second-rounders to Memphis, and Brian Roberts obviously went to Miami. Possible targets I've heard for the Hornets are Dwight Howard, for reasons unknown. Maybe MJ just wants a real shot at the playoffs. Al Jefferson's in the final year of his deal, and maybe they think giving Dwight the max afterwards is a viable option. What do you guys think the Charlotte Hornets will end up doing?
I mean, Charlotte's the ultimate like run of the mill, middle of the pack team. Like, I feel like every year they're always like hovering around like this, like the 7 seed or 8 seed. And I think they're going to continue to do this because they don't have the assets like Boston does to really pry a star. I mean, I don't really know how they would get Dwight Howard. I don't know their draft pick situation. But I guess they're going to be I think they're going to be buyers, but I just don't know what they're really realistically what they're going to be able to get. Other than, I mean, Courtney Lee's a good pickup, but they're just going to continue to be a middle of the road team.
Yeah, I feel like Charlotte's a team that's always involved in trade talks. Last offseason of the deadline, they're active. They picked up Mo Williams. I could see them trying to make another move. I like the Courtney Lee pickup. He's a solid two-guard for them, I think. And I think someone was tweeting out that Courtney Lee does well every time he's moved for at least a year. So maybe that'll work out for them. I know they said they had the interest in Dwight, but I don't really know what they could offer Houston that they'd really be interested.
I agree with that. Dwight's a tough one. But there's been rumors, so I thought I'd mention. So do you guys think the Hornets do make a move outside of the Courtney Lee move, or you think that's it for them?
I think that's it. I think ideally they would like to get rid of Al Jefferson, but I don't know what. I mean, I just don't know what they would get in return. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really think they don't have a lot of. I mean, they're just really overachieving this year. Like, they have a horrible roster. And just Kemba Walker's just playing so good, and I guess Steve Clifford's just that good of a coach. But I don't think they make any more moves. I don't think they have anything realistically that can that makes another deal likely that would benefit them, I guess.
I think they'd be open to it, but it's unlikely they actually do anything.
Fair enough. The Washington Wizards. I think they're sellers. I think their goal could possibly be to clear up some cap space. Maybe work KD to DC. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. So some of the assets they do have, Jared Dudley and possibly Nene. I know he's been hurt. I know he's not an attractive player in the sense of he hasn't been playing great this year. But he isn't expiring, and I know expirings aren't that big of a deal with the new cap coming in. But someone could possibly use Nene as a 4 and as a rental for this year, and then just let him go on his way. So what do you guys think the Wizards will do? I haven't heard many rumors outside of Jared Dudley, but any thoughts?
I haven't heard anything either. I think the Wizards should sell. Like you said, I think if they're going to buy, it's just like what do they don't really have many assets. It's like they have Bradley Beal. I mean, maybe you try and I think they should try and sell Beal kind of just because he's just so injury prone, and I don't think because he's had the injuries, I don't think him and Wall are enough to get KD to DC anymore. They have the Nene contract. I don't really know what to think about Washington because they've been so disappointing, and it's hard to gauge that team because Randy Whitman is such a horrible coach. But I think Washington's going to make a couple small moves. Maybe they get rid of Jared Dudley. They try and get some picks, something like that.
The only move I really saw the Wizards really interested in, I saw something about Ryan Anderson, but they weren't willing to give up Kelly Oubre Jr., who is probably their best asset, I guess, other than picks. So I don't think the Wizards will do anything. They're kind of caught, and they're right at the bottom of the playoff race, and they can't really do enough that's going to push them in anywhere in the playoffs. So it's kind of a tough season for them. I think it would make the most sense to move Beal and try to get something for him before he's a free agent, but I don't think they'll do it.
Yeah, one thing about Washington, they could really use that stretch 4 because right now I think they have Chris Humphries shooting threes.
Yeah.
So I mean,
good luck.
There's that. They haven't, in fairness, they haven't gotten Alan Anderson, who I thought was a great pickup. They haven't gotten anything from him. I think he's been hurt the entire.
Yeah, I think it was an ankle injury. I'm pretty sure.
I haven't seen much of Kelly Oubre, but I think you gotta either keep him or Otto Porter. I think Otto Porter has made some strides. I think he would be a better asset to move. I would kind of roll the dice on Kelly Oubre. The contract's a lot cheaper. You'll have to pay him pay Otto Porter 2 years sooner than you have to pay Kelly Oubre. So I would personally try to move Otto Porter if there is a market for him. Moving on to the final team in the Southeast Division, the Orlando Magic. I think they're sellers. I think their goal is to have the maximum amount of cap space for next summer. I think some of the assets they do have that have been linked to trades or that could possibly be linked to trades in the future. Victor Oladipo, Evan Fournier, I think they're probably going to have to make a decision between those two eventually. C.J. Watson, who I think he's been hurt, but he has, I believe his deal is, let me make sure.
I think it's a 2-year, $5 million deal for each year. I think. Maybe it's 3 years.
Okay, so this year he's making 5. Next year he's making 5. And the year after it's not guaranteed. So I think that could be an attractive option for someone.
I mean, he's a solid backup point guard.
Eventually you'd think he'd get healthy, right? So, and he's a solid backup in my opinion. I know Nick disagrees because of CJ's time in Brooklyn, but I think Watson's a solid player. And then Channing Frye could also be another target for another asset for them that they could move to probably flip for something. They did make a trade earlier today. They acquired Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova for Tobias Harris. Do you guys think any other moves are made for the Orlando Magic?
Yeah, well, I think their biggest issue is they don't have – and it's like the same issue they've had for the past – like I feel like ever since Oladipo got there, they don't have enough shooters. You know, in today's NBA, it's like, you know, your ceiling is only so high if you don't have shooters. And, you know, Hazonia is a promising young player. He's a good shooter. And obviously Fry, but, you know, and Fournier, I guess. Fournier's a really good shooter. But, like, Peyton can't shoot. Oladipo's been better the past month, but he was really struggling the first part of the season. And him and Peyton, I just don't think work together. They're both ball dominant. Both aren't great shooters. And I think, you know, now they got rid of Harris. I guess we'll see what happens. But I think their biggest thing is they got to get rid of one of those guys. And I think they would get – it seems like they're really high on Peyton. I think that Oladipo has more value too. I think moving Oladipo makes a lot of sense to maybe get you could start Fournier the rest of the year, then bring in Hazonia next year, and then get a really good small forward to go with those guys, to go with Aaron Gordon and Vucevic. And they need some veterans too. I mean, they got Fry, who's a veteran, and Watson, but that team is all like 24-year-olds. So I think they need some age on that team, some wisdom.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising they actually moved Tobias Harris and they didn't try to move one of the two guards instead. Like Oladipo, you know, has been mentioned in a lot of trade rumors. Surprisingly, I've heard a rumor that Orlando offered Oladipo for Jeff Teague, which is interesting with Peyton. But I think Orlando's definitely selling, trying to build up that cap space. And like you said, they need to kind of get a good veteran presence. I know last free agency they went after Paul Millsap, and he almost signed there. So it looks like they're trying to take that next step to get into the playoffs. They started the season well, but they really kind of cooled off and haven't done much of late.
Yeah, I personally think that they won't make another trade. I think the one they did make was huge. I think Detroit won that trade in the short term. Eventually, if Orlando could make something of it in terms of cap space, because one of these two, Oladipo, Fournier, will have to be signed. I don't think they can afford to lose both. I like Oladipo, but I just haven't been seeing it from him. I've seen glimpses of what Fournier can do, so I personally would just go with Fournier.
Yeah, and I've seen glimpses of Oladipo too. They both had glimpses. But I think Oladipo is a player option this year, or there's a team option I think they have on Oladipo. Fournier is a free agent, and they said he's demanding about $10 million. So I think what they're going to do is probably ride out the rest of the year and then evaluate things in the summer. Like, okay, you know, we got like 3 point guards because they have Brandon Jennings too, who's going to be a free agent. But I think they'll just kind of ride things out and stay put the rest of the